Most people think financial fraud won't happen to them until it does. In today's episode, I'm joined by Todd, a forensic accountant with decades of experience investigating financial crimes, from corporate fraud to family betrayal. As our population ages and scams become more sophisticated, Kelly shares how financial fraud is getting more personal and harder to detect. In today's conversation, you'll learn what the fraud triangle is, how to reduce access points to protect aging parents, and the red flags of caregiver fraud. Whether you're supporting aging loved ones or simply want to be proactive for yourself and your family, this episode will help you build awareness and take action. I hope you find this conversation as meaningful as I did. Todd, welcome to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so before we dive into this conversation, I would love to start off with listeners hearing what really brought you to wanting to speak and be so focused on this area of speaking about fraud?
So, I am a forensic accountant by trade. I have spent my career uncovering financial betrayal, whether it's for corporations or individuals, in some kind of financial dispute. And I love it. I love the investigation aspect. I love the putting the pieces of the puzzle together, that sort of thing. And I'm at this point in my career where I realize that number one, I want to leave an impact. I want to make an impact for my clients and for other people. And, I can make a bigger impact if I am out there empowering others who are going through major financial events, whether it be, the types of things that your listeners are going through, or it's could be a divorce, or it could, a myriad of things. But I can make more of an impact by spreading the word of fraud awareness and empowering others than I can reactively investigating one financial crime at a time. And I've got the time to do that now. I'm at that place in my career where I can spend some time just sharing what I have learned over the years, essentially helping others so that financial betrayal doesn't become a part of their story.
This is so important, and I really look forward to talking with you today. It felt kind of timely. Unfortunately, actually, this is just in my personal life. A good friend I was just speaking to this weekend, and his mother was, catfished. And we're hearing more and more stories about this. And I'm assuming I definitely want your way in because I think you're more of the expert than me, but this is on the rise. And I think technology and now, with AI, it's like everything's AI. I feel like it's become that much more easy to A, take advantage of someone, but B, making it that much harder to, verify, is this real or not? And I think this is a really kind of, unfortunately, sad reality of the times that we're living in today.
Yeah.
Can you kind of paint a picture for, like, what to look for, where to start?
Well, I think the number one thing is most people believe that it won't happen to them. It's going to happen to your best friend, or it's going to happen to somebody else. It's not going to happen to you. And so probably the most important element is just being aware that it can happen. And whatever the situation may be, how can it happen? And the types of things that you need to be looking for and paying attention to. And I will say this, especially with regards to your friend, I have been on that same journey with my mother.
Ugh.
And it just gets more and more complicated all the time. But my mother sent $10,000 in cash, because she had been basically bullied on the phone. And, older individuals are more vulnerable to these types of things. And my mother, when that happened, was in the early stages of dementia. And fortunately, this story has a good ending in that she had a lucid moment. after she had gone to UPS and mailed the money,
Wow.
the next morning she calls me and she said, Kelly, I think I've done something wrong. And I'm like, okay, let's, slow down. What happened? And she told me, and she said, I mailed somebody this money, and it was all I could do to not, get upset and what have you. But fortunately, she went back to the UPS store and she was able to stop the money.
Oh, wow.
She was able to stop it and somewhere in the middle United States, wherever it was, and got it back. So
Wow.
hallelujah. It had a good
Yeah.
ending, but it's the type of thing that, again, that is happened in my own life, but yet have had a million conversations with my mother about being careful, with her money and with people that she's in contact with and that sort of thing. And so, that just ties it all together for me as I find myself on this fraud awareness journey.
Oh, absolutely. Like just bringing that back home and so personal. This is one of the areas, it's not fun to talk about, so I applaud you for really, spearheading this and wanting to focus on this area because honestly, these are the heartbreaking stories and
Mhm.
cases and I have worked with clients and why a professional gets involved, it's after the fact, after the
Mhm.
damage has been done so I've seen both the example that we were talking about before, like your mother and my friend's mother, where somebody's, probably called up and taken advantage of. Typically the cases that I'm involved with, though, it's someone close
Mhm.
to, the client, the person that I'm supporting. And even recently, I mean, we just had in SF Gate, there was an article, and it's a pretty large case of a family's estate is going after, I believe it was two or three caregivers that stole millions of dollars from a woman, and she's now passed. So it's the heirs going after them. And, scenarios like that, at least with the work that I do, unfortunately, is what I see more of, where it's the family or the caregivers, someone that's in the inner circle going to the
Mhm.
house. With just knowing that, I'm sure that you're seeing that too with your work,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
All the time. All
Yeah.
the time. It's so unfortunate.
What can you kind of, shed light on? I don't know. Is it what to look for, what to do, ways that we can be proactive, just as informed citizens, as, caregivers, as supporting our aging parents and also ourselves.
Well, the one of the issues I think that becomes, especially with aging parents, and then, just in your work and, with trust and estate issues, is that it is really multifaceted. It's multifaceted vulnerabilities. You've got
Yeah.
the aging parents, which creates a set of challenges. You've got money. Anywhere there is money, there is problems, and there can be problems and
Yeah.
greed and that type of thing. But you also have more people with their hands in the pot. And unlike a business that has maybe internal controls to help or oversight to keep bad things from happening or keeping employees from doing improper things, it's not that way when you're talking about your aging parents and the guardians and the caregivers and the scammers and the children and maybe the blended family. And the more complicated it gets, also with our aging parents, we were raised talking about money is a taboo subject, right?
Yeah.
So the communication itself is not good. And fraud hides in the shadows, in the dark places,
Ah,
in the lack of communication, and that sort of thing. So, to the extent, and when I finally had to talk with my mother, for example, about, hey, it might be time, and I'm an only child, that I take control of your financial situation, and we need to think about access points or the number of accounts that you have or the credit cards or whatever, think about those as windows and doors in a house. And you wouldn't leave your house unlocked and your windows open just for anybody to come in. So you want
Mm.
to or need to lock the windows, lock the doors, or do away with them. I mean, reduce the number of access points to somebody's money can go a long way in helping to improve the situation.
I like that analogy. That's really helpful. So, what I'm imagining what that looks like is maybe if let's just use the example of your mother. She has, let's say, 15 credit cards, and it does happen.
Oh, yeah, it does. It didn't happen with my mother, but it does happen for
Yeah, it
sure.
does happen. I can report that's where there's a lot of work. But, they have every department store and, they were wanting to, maximize on the points. So in that scenario, is that really where it would be closing some of those accounts and consolidating to like one, maybe two credit cards? Is that like a good example of what would be like kind of a good way of supporting someone and
Sure.
closing the windows and locking the doors?
hmm That is a great example. Or the number of bank accounts, or debit cards, or direct access to cash, that sort of thing. Yes. Anything that you can do to reduce access points is helpful.
That's very helpful. I like that analogy. I'll continue to use it.
Good. It's memorable.
Yeah. So what else could we be doing that's proactive? Are there any kind of products that you recommend or I think that there's some like prepaid debit cards or such. This isn't going to be for everyone, but maybe if you're just supporting an aging parent and wanting to give them as much autonomy as possible, but also wanting to be mindful that they could and a lot of times may already be a target. There might already be, unfortunately, I've worked so, enough years where when I start working with a client, a lot of times it's like people might even be already taking advantage of someone and, knocking on the doors and writing letters and really kind of focused on that person.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a there's a lot there in what you just said, but I did use a or got my mother, and it was very, very helpful, especially when she had a caregiver that would take her out and go shopping and that sort of thing, but a prepaid card specifically for caregivers. And I think it was TrueLink Financial.
Yeah, I've worked with them. Yes,
Okay.
I actually for a few of my beneficiaries we have them set up. So it's a wonderful product. So we'll
hmm
definitely link to that in the show notes for listeners if they're interested in exploring that.
But I would say this from a prevention perspective, and
Mhm.
we've kind of covered a lot of different ground from just caregiver and an aging parent, but just being vigilant. If you feel that something's off with your parents, keep an eye on bank transactions. Are there large swings, large unusual swings, unusual transactions, something that is out of the norm for your loved one, types of purchases and things of that nature? But looking for those types of financial irregularities, unexplained withdrawals, odd transactions, things of that nature from a document perspective. I mean, that's one thing. But then there's also when you're talking about caregivers or family members or other beneficiaries, what have you, the behavioral aspect and the caregiver's actions, for example. So, secrecy, everything's
Mm.
cloaked in secrecy. Maybe there's a, lack of financial reports or late or missing financial reports or just vague information that's given. Again, it kind of goes back to the idea that fraud is hidden in the shadows, again, so that vague information can be a warning sign that there might be something going on. Or, is the person living beyond their means? Is all of a sudden they have access and are making purchases that are out of the norm for them, especially
Mm.
knowing what they should be making, that sort of thing. So, there are a lot of warning signs to be able to pay attention to. The important thing is that you pay attention to them and that if you feel like something is off, to say something.
Do you just even with like reporting agencies, do you have like if there are a lot of red flags, what are your recommendations of kind of next steps? Like even, this, example that we started with where I was like, I just had a phone call this weekend with a friend where he's like, my mom was catfished. I mean, if you know that money has been taken, and there's this like undue influence, do you have any recommendations of where to start?
You can contact the FBI. You can contact law enforcement. I have not personally, like in my mother's situation, basically law enforcement looked at us and said, sorry. It is because of the way the
Yeah.
scammers and the addresses that they use and things like that, it's almost impossible to get anywhere with it. But I think the important thing is that you are reporting it from the perspective of, what was the situation and what was the scam that was used and that type of thing, so that they can raise awareness of the types of scams that are being perpetrated on the aging population, that type of thing.
Yeah, and also like I mean, of course, being a licensed professional, I'm probably gonna, be making those reports. One would
Hmm.
hope, right?
Hmm.
But my mind also goes to is that, I don't always assume that this is the first time. I actually assume that this has probably been a repeat. And the more that we actually can report, it might build a case. And there's no way of knowing, if this person's targeted, I mean, sometimes it's dozens or hundreds of individuals. So the more that we can bring awareness and attention, hopefully
Hmm.
something can be done and stopped, even if it is not specific for you and your benefit, for really the community as a whole. I think it's so important. When kind of going back to we I think you briefly touched upon, maybe a fraudster's like mentality or things to look out for, and you pointed to secrecy. Are there any other kind of pieces or things to share about maybe their psychology or just kind of getting behind what kind of the motive is? And I think for us to just be again just maybe more aware and more on guard for protecting ourselves and our loved ones.
It's really a double-edged sword from the perspective of the fraudster or the wrongdoer is generally going to exploit trust,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
But we have to have trust in our relationships, and you have to be able to trust caregivers and guardians and custodians and you name it, you have to be able to have that trust. So it goes back to, again, some type of oversight and just paying attention. Now, back to the psychology. The general psychology of the fraudster is, we talk a lot about the fraud triangle. It's like, why does somebody do something wrong,
Mm,
or why do they do what they do? And generally, it starts with a need or greed. And the reality is that most people don't generally intend, they don't set out to commit a fraud. Some do,
yeah.
but in general, even the most honest people can and do make mistakes and find themselves involved in a situation that is, less than good. And we never know what's going to push a person to do something wrong. And it could be that there is something going on in their life, whether it is an addiction or whether it is some kind of financial catastrophe of their own or a sick loved one that they need medications for or what have you. There's something that creates a need or some type of greed that causes them to take some type of action. But then there's the opportunity, and that goes back to, the second part of the fraud triangle is the opportunity, and that goes back to the doors and windows and the access points.
Mm,
It's where there's an opportunity and they can gain access without somebody seeing or knowing or being aware. And then finally, it's the rationalization that,
Mm,
hey, I need this and I'm just going to borrow it. And I cannot tell you how many times I have investigated a financial crime, and it is the rationalization that, I deserve this. I'm not
yeah.
making enough money, you name it, but it's the rationalization that continues and actually perpetuates the wrongdoing that they're committing and that exploitation of trust.
That definitely resonates with what I've seen. And I mean, again, my work is focused on, trust and estate
Hmm.
administration, but when you see these situations, and unfortunately it's usually families torn apart at this point, and I have seen those situations where it's one of the children that's been
Hmm.
financially abusing mom and dad and taking advantage, but there's this big piece of entitlement, right?
Hmm.
There's not even like the separation. They see, that is mine for whatever reason, whether they're doing the lion's share of caregiving or they were mom or dad's favorite or weren't. It's really heartbreaking to see that. So, with kind of looking ahead, what do you kind of anticipate how this might evolve? I mean, should we, I hate to say that this is doomsday, but at least from what I could anticipate is that this is going to become an even more growing concern. We're seeing this, baby boomers aging. It in a way it almost seems like a perfect storm, right? This growing senior population, and also with the technology and I think AI advancements where this is just becoming, you know, I think going to be more commonplace. Are you anticipating this too? I mean, am I
Well,
off? Any
no,
hope?
I no, I don't think you're off at all, but I think it just again raises the need for awareness and just to be skeptical, even if it's could be happening to you or it could be happening to a loved one, being skeptical and understanding that you need to question. And like an AI phone call, for example, and you don't know, it's your loved one's voice and you recognize it and it sounds just like them. But is it off? Is it a question or whatever they're asking for? If they're asking for money or, I'm in jail or what have you, is that normal for that person? But another option that you could have is a code word, for example,
Mm.
to identify, is this really my loved one that I'm speaking to? I mean, that is one option, but it again goes just back to being aware and being on guard and being vigilant and being skeptical.
Oh, unfortunately, I agree. It's sad. And I do agree with kind of that point you brought up before of like it is a double-edged sword because of course, we want to lead with like kind of with love and with our heart and empathy and compassion, and building those relationships is so important. And I think it does really require a team, for most people as we age, as we need support.
Mhm.
It shouldn't just be on one person. But the analogy of the windows and doors, I think that you really drove that home, and that makes so much sense. Kelly, where can listeners kind of find you? Are you working with people individually and supporting, or what does that look like right now?
Yeah, so you can reach me at my firm, which is Forensic Strategic Solutions. The web address is forensicstrategic.com. And yes, I do work with, like I mentioned before, my general work is helping somebody after it's happened, with
Yeah.
the exception of this, just raising awareness, before it and helping people before it happens. But I can also be found on very active on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, we'll link all of that in the show notes. Kelly, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you and meeting with you and just bringing, awareness to this really crucial, important topic. I applaud you for the work you're doing.
Great. Thanks so much.